Welcome back. You're on Outsiders with Rowan Dean, editor of the Spectator magazine, columnist for the Australian Financial Review.
That's it, that's the one.
Co-host of Outsiders. My name's Ross Cameron. Here in the studio, we have John Preston, shooters, fishers and farmers candidate for the state seat of the Hunter in New South Wales, the centre of that beautiful black coal seam. And with us on the screen from South Australia, former Federal Circuit judge and member of the Free Speech Coalition, Stuart Lindsay. Welcome to Outsiders.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Well, listen, we wanted to reprise this story of the bill sent to axiomatic events by the Victorian Police Service following...
$68,000 bill.
68, was it?
$68,000 sent to the organisers of the Lauren Southern tour.
So this is an event, Lauren Southern, Stefan Molyneux, who came to Australia. They sold 1,500 tickets for an indoor event inside, perfectly peaceful.
Yep.
And yet the cost to the organiser is $68,000 afterwards because of the violent protest led by a group called Antifa, anti-fascist, which has been reported as a rather ironic name.
Yes.
But why don't... so I thought we should get Stuart, as a former, a former senior judicial officer in the land, give us your headline.
Before we do that, just explain it. We'll just quickly show the grab of Dave Pellowe from Axiomatic on Outsiders the other day, explaining that he was not going to pay this bill and why he was refusing to pay the $68,000 that the Victorian police are asking. Let's just have a quick look at Dave Pellowe on our show last week.
If this was applied to any other situation where somebody was lawlessly using violence against a law-abiding citizen just minding their own business and exercising their common law rights, that would be called blaming the victim, and it's not okay in any context. So the last thing I'm going to do is say that's okay and pay the bill, or even just ignore the bill. We have to say to all of Australia, it's not okay to enable the thugs' veto.
Stuart Lindsay, what's your reaction to Dave Pellowe from Axiomatic Events?
Well, I think the position he takes is an honourable one, frankly. My involvement in this, I'm not retained by Axiomatic or its solicitor. I went to the Lauren Southern Stefan Molyneux event in Adelaide. I met the directors of Axiomatic, very personable people. And then it was subsequent to the Adelaide event that the events happened in Melbourne. And of course, you've all seen the footage, I assume, of what happened when people going to a perfectly ordinary political meeting. I can tell you, as I say, I was in attendance at the Molyneux Southern event in Adelaide. They were expressing views in a moderate and sensible way about matters that 10 years ago we would have considered orthodox political commentary. But the experience that David and his company had in Melbourne, of course, was that Antifa and sub-affiliates of Antifa, having heard that Molyneux and Southern were to speak, then set about recruiting people to go to the meeting and to disrupt it. They were quite explicit that their purpose was to disrupt Conservatives being able to express a view and other Conservatives being able to listen to them in a peaceable fashion. So in these circumstances, with those threats having been made, with obviously the organisers becoming concerned about that and speaking to the police, for the police to then deal with them, as it were, on a commercial basis and send a bill of this magnitude, not only, of course, caused difficulties for Axiomatic on this occasion, but, gentlemen, you can imagine the message that sends to other persons, other promoters, other individuals who are wanting to organise political meetings expressing similar views. What encouragement do you think it gives to groups like Antifa to up the ante? My concern as a former judicial officer, especially in this situation, is from the rule of law perspective, that it's, in my view, extraordinary that the police would be obliged, surely against their own wishes, the police would be obliged to be, as it were, participes criminis, to be accomplices to what is essentially a standover operation by intolerant sections of the community who don't want people to express views with which they don't agree.
John, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, if this is allowed to stand, effectively what you're creating is a business model for lawbreakers to disrupt people engaging in free speech in a completely law-abiding fashion. I watched the 35-minute speech that Lauren Southern gave and thought it was thoroughly innocuous. Yeah. What disturbs me, like you, is that this is an appalling lack of judgment on the part of the Victorian police engaging in what is effectively partiality in exercising their functions. And I thought along the same lines as you. I mean, this is not a local council. These people also have the power to apply for a search warrant to search people's homes, yes. Intercept people's telephone calls. Yep. I'm sure you've had them apply for warrants with you over the years. And the fact that they've either in fact or appearance have engaged in some form of partiality, it's completely unacceptable.
So what's the legal situation here? Because, Stuart, what's the constitutional situation? Or should the police, can the police choose who they're going to go and protect, or do they have a duty to look after every individual?
Well, the Victoria Police, Section 8 of the Victoria Police Act says that the role of Victoria Police, and I've just made a note of it here, is to serve the Victorian community and uphold the law so as to promote a safe, secure and orderly society. And you've seen the vision as to what's happening when people are involved in ordinary assembly for free speech purposes. So, look, each case will turn on its own set of facts. In this particular instance, my view, just as someone who's involved in the Free Speech Coalition with some legal knowledge and legal background, is that the police are rather half-hearted about collecting the bill in these particular circumstances. So Axiomatic has some, in my view, some very sound responses on the facts of their particular case. But there are broader issues, of course. There are broader issues involved.
We'll just get to those, Stuart, in a sec. Ross?
Just for the benefit of our audience, just tell us what has been your legal background, Stuart?
I was a judge of the Federal Circuit Court for a period of 10 years, from 2004 to 2014. Before that, I was at the bar. I've subsequently returned to the bar here in Adelaide. OK, so the police sent out a bloke to say, oh no, this is a perfectly orthodox exercise of our charging powers because, for example, we charge the MCG for police to provide security at their events. So we can also charge Stephen Molyneux and Lauren Southern. What do you say to that? Well, I heard that. I heard that the police said that, but more disappointingly, I also understand that that's what the Attorney-General in Victoria said, Ms Neville. And that's the part that's profoundly disappointing to me. The view that because someone paid for a ticket at these events, that it adds an element of commerciality which cuts across the fact that, first of all, it's the exercise of free speech, but secondly, the police have only been called to such an event, or their attention has only been drawn to it, because property is said to be threatened and persons' safety is said to be threatened. Now, it's respectfully fatuous, in my view, to suggest that because there's some commercial element to the exercise, that somehow the police can abandon what's a fundamental duty of police in a liberal democratic society, and that is to protect people going about the ordinary business of expressing a political view.
Now, John,
so for Ms Neville to do this, for Ms Neville as the law officer of the state, I know she's a politician, and whatever her background is, she holds the office of the senior law officer in Victoria, and she's surely obliged to give a proper answer and give a proper account as to why the police role is being so perverted in these sorts of circumstances.
John?
Look, those people attending Lauren Southern's event had a right to feel safe and secure. And you're right, the Attorney-General is a politician. That's why we separate the politics in policing and have a Commissioner of Police. Now, the fact that the invoice has been issued in the Commissioner's name is completely unacceptable. And all these invoices should be withdrawn. This sends absolutely the wrong message. It provides an economic incentive for lawbreakers to go and disrupt people who are, to all intents and purposes, minding their own business and engaging in, you know, what is democratic dialogue.
Well, we've got a few historical precedents for this, John, and I know they always say if you invoke Adolf Hitler, you've lost the argument, but I think in this case, it's not about an argument. Hitler's brown shirts used to wander around and do pretty much what this current mob seem to be doing, disrupting, and Ross referred to the fact that the term Antifa supposedly means anti-fascist, and it's a very ironic term. I'll just quote, "It is all right," Hitler boasted to the police. "We've got what we wanted." He was talking about when they interrupted some character called Ballenstedt. Ballenstedt did not speak. This is in the 30s, Hitler in his brown shirt, Stuart. As Hitler told an audience some months before, the National Socialist movement will in the future ruthlessly prevent, if necessary by force, all meetings and lectures that are likely to distract the minds of our fellow countrymen. So, Stuart, here you have a historical precedent where they boasted about their ability to disrupt a different political point of view, and they did it as a deliberate strategy. Dave Pellowe played us a clip last week from an Antifa guy boasting that simply by the action of the police charging them, it would send a chilling effect to other organisations. So do you see that this is the way that this is going to go? Other people will just go, it's too hard to have Conservatives, and the brown shirts, i.e. Antifa in this instance, win?
Well, I would think that's already happening, Rowan, and I understand from speaking to David that is already happening. Other people are being discouraged from holding events, fearful that it's going to draw Antifa's attention and that people attending the meet will be threatened or, as in the case of Melbourne, spat at. Men and women on the buses. I mean, the situation in Melbourne was just extraordinary. It really did sound like something out of the lowest times of the Weimar Republic, as you say, when the brown shirts and the reds were disrupting each other's meetings. There were people.
What the police had. Do you think if the left sent their speakers down like Joseph Stiglitz, that there'd be a whole bunch of people from the right out kicking things over? I mean, this is essentially saying that if you hold an event and we consider it impolitic, you know, we might send you a bill. Well, if you want to take that argument to its logical conclusion, refund my money for Kevin Rudd's Prime Ministership and Lauren Southern's policing's on me.
Ross?
Well, I think, you know, we did see Malcolm Turnbull in the leadership contest with Peter Dutton. Malcolm Turnbull used the machinery of the state to attack Dutton in relation to
you're referring about the Solicitor General,
question.
yes.
Yeah. And what I think we are seeing likewise under the Obama era, we saw the Obama administration use the Internal Revenue Service to sool the dogs onto every Tea Party organisation to have a tax audit. We are seeing now the use of the, the intelligence services to attack Donald Trump, the citizen's choice as President of the United States. And I would say that this is a use of the machinery of the state by the Victorian government to attack opinions it does not like. I'm happy for the judge to provide a different view.
No, look, I agree with that, and I must say in many respects one hopes that the Victorian government is foolish enough to actually prosecute this civil claim, because living in Australia, of course, we come from a rich common law tradition where freedoms, and especially freedoms relating to speech, are jealously guarded. They're jealously guarded by the common law, the power that's given to the police commissioner under regulations under the Victorian Police Act. The exercise of those powers is reviewable by our courts. The courts have long taken the view that in the exercise of those powers, fundamental common law rights and freedoms are to be recognised. And of course, in Australia, as we also know, in the last 25 years, the High Court has developed with some very fine degree of calibration some jurisprudence in relation to the constitutional guarantee relating to freedom of communication about political matters. So there's an array of weapons that speaking metaphorically, there's an array of weapons that someone in David's position can have resort to in our courts, and I would welcome the opportunity on behalf of the Free Speech Coalition for the Victorian government to put us to the test. May I just raise one other matter, gentlemen? We're talking about the Victorian government. We're talking about matters that are surely fundamental to the operation of democracy in the state of Victoria. I'm here in South Australia. Perhaps it's a function of the availability of information in the press, but what are the Victorian opposition saying about these matters? Why isn't this a matter? I understand there's an election happening in Victoria before the end of the year. Why isn't the Victorian opposition and their legal affairs spokesman or spokeswomen really making the run with this? Do they? Well,
let's hope, Stuart, thank you. Let's hope that they pick up on that and do exactly that. Stuart Lindsay, thank you so much for being with us on Outsiders and for your insights. It's fantastic. And we do hope that in Victoria they do stand up, the Liberal Party, and fight this. And let's hope that the police back down, because it affects all of us, as you say. Stuart Lindsay, thank you so much.
Thank you, gentlemen.